Thank you for joining us for Sermons on Demand from Friendship Grace Brethren Church. We provide these videos as a way to share the pulpit messages and teachings offered at Friendship Grace Brethren Church. If you find these videos a helpful resource, please drop us a note at info@friendshipgracebrethren.com. Now open your Bibles and get ready to dig into the Word of God.
Healing. That's what we're going to talk about this morning. Healing from chapter 8 of the Gospel of Luke. We continue our study of the Gospel of Luke. We'll finish chapter 8 this morning. Last week we saw Jesus calm the storm and cast out a bunch of demons out of a man living in a graveyard, and the demons were permitted to enter a herd of pigs who then ran off a cliff and drowned. Always a fascinating story. The townspeople who had lost a great deal of money demanded Jesus leave the area. Said, "Get out, we don't want any trouble from you anymore." He returned to the boat and returned to the western side of the Sea of Galilee, and that's where we pick up the account this morning. We're in chapter 8, verse 40. Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. Again, Dr. Luke doesn't give us real specific location information, but I'm going to assume that he returned to Capernaum. That's where the apostles that were fishermen, where they were headquartered, that's where their boats were, and that's where the crowd usually gathered around him. So it makes sense that they were in Capernaum. When he gets back to the dock, there's a great big crowd waiting for him. Jesus was faced with these crowds almost all the time that he moved about the Galilee region. So he's moving about, and this horde of people is constantly following him. I think that would get pretty tiring. I think that would get old really quick. Paparazzi, yeah. What's intriguing to me is that they were waiting for him. He left and went to the other side, and I don't think he filed a float plan. I don't think that they had any knowledge of when he was coming back, but yet there they were waiting for him. Over on the east side of the lake, the crowd had lost something, and they forced him to leave, while the crowd on the west side of the lake was waiting for him. What's the difference between these crowds? One had lost, one had gained. This was all about their own personal desires and needs and what they wanted and what they received. Verse 41, and there came a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue, and falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house. For he had an only daughter about 12 years of age, and she was dying. As Jesus went, the people pressed around him. Pressed by the crowd, the president of the local synagogue made his way to speak to Jesus. I suspect that he was respected enough in Capernaum that as he and his entourage walked, the crowds parted. He wasn't doing this kind of deal. He wasn't pushing people out of his way. They got out of his way because of who he was. But then Jairus does something that had to be somewhat of a shock to the crowd. He comes and finds Jesus, and he falls at his feet. The implication there is that he grabs his ankles and his face is down on his toes kind of deal. He falls at his feet. What makes this remarkable is that Jesus had just returned from the Gentile side of the lake. He had just returned from a graveyard. He had just returned from casting out demons. There's no way Jesus was ceremonially clean, ritually clean. The leader of the synagogue would have known that. But the leader of the synagogue set aside all of his religious rituals, all of his religious custom, and went and grabbed Jesus. because his religion didn't do what he needed done. He set aside his religious rituals to deal with a significant issue in his life. As a good parent, the only thing on his mind was his dying daughter. When he fell at Jesus' feet, it was in humility, in reverence, and respect for Jesus, regardless of his religious responsibilities. He may have been a Pharisee, and that makes it even more important. Here's your first question. What do Jairus' actions indicate? What's indicated by his falling on his face before them, before Jesus? What's that tell us?
Jesus was empowered to assist him in his time of need.
Okay, Jesus was empowered.
It had to be incredibly humbling.
Yeah, it had to be really humbling, yeah.
For him to do that.
Yeah. It had to be incredibly humbling. Jairus' actions indicate that he recognized that his religious ritual wouldn't heal his daughter. Now, I want you to think about that. What if all of a sudden, everything that you were accustomed to doing as a matter of your religious practice had to be set aside to accomplish what you needed to accomplish? That would be frustrating. Be humbling. Maybe even humiliating. He was the leader of Judaism there in Capernaum. He was the leader of the synagogue, and that would mean he was also the leader of the local elders. He controlled what was going on.
And you put him in shock.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely shock people. Yeah. The Jews were not accustomed to miracles and healing as part of their ritual. They expected the Messiah to be able to perform miracles and to heal people, which is why Jairus was attracted to Jesus in the first place. And when he had seen that Jesus had done these things, he was setting aside his religious practice. When he grabbed Jesus' feet, he dismissed his religious ritual and appealed to the creator, sustainer of the universe. It's a remarkable thing for the leader of the local synagogue. As I said, he was also the leader of the local elders. Being the leader of the local elders meant that he was in control of everything that happened in town. Remember, there's no separation between synagogue and state. They're the same thing. If you're a Jew in Israel at the time, it was all part of your religious practice and your civil practice all rolled into one. But Jairus was willing to risk it. He didn't even think that far in concern for his daughter. He didn't think of the implications of setting aside his religious practice. He didn't think of the implications of touching somebody that was ceremonially unclean. Now, he would also have to get clean. Everything that Jesus would touch would have to be cleaned. There was a process that would have to happen. All he was thinking about was his daughter. He was desperate. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And though she had spent all of her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. So Jesus began to go with Jairus. Jairus comes, and the mob is there, and he's going with Jairus, walking through the crowd. A woman who had been bleeding for 12 years got close enough to touch the fringe of his coat. There's a great bunch of stuff to unpack in those statements. Some scholars have tried to make an issue out of Jairus' daughter being 12 years of age and the woman having blood discharge for 12 years. I don't see anything other than the commonality of the numbers. And you can't put every place that a number 12 is in the Bible together. I mean, it's okay. They both are 12. I don't think there's any significance to that. There are those that have biblical numerology down pat and think there's hidden meanings behind all that. I don't. I think it's just plain. Daughter was 12 years old. She could have been 13. She could have been 11. It wouldn't change the story any. The woman bleeding for 12 years was ritually unclean for 12 years. She could not be made ceremonially clean for the entire time she was bleeding. So she hadn't been able to offer sacrifice. She hadn't been able to go to the temple and pay her tax or anything. She was ritually unclean for 12 years. She was also prohibited, because she was unclean, she was prohibited from going into a large crowd where somebody might accidentally touch her. Their righteousness, so-called righteousness, wouldn't infect her. Her uncleanness would infect them. And so she was prohibited legally from going into a crowd. Just like Jairus, she was willing to risk it so she could be healed. I noticed that though the woman didn't attempt to interact with Jesus, she just wanted to get close enough to touch his garment, to touch him. She recognized the power of Jesus and just wanted to touch him or his garment. She had already spent her life savings on docs that couldn't heal her. Even if they were Dr. Bill, she couldn't have been healed, because God used her for a particular incident, this event. She demonstrated faith because she was really desperate. She wanted to be close enough to touch his garment. She didn't need to talk to him. She didn't even try to talk to him. She just wanted to touch him. That's tremendous faith. She reached out and touched the fringe of his garment. The fringe or tassel was what reminded the Jews of the commandments. It was worn on the outer corners of their garments, like you can see in this picture here. It reminded them of the commandments God had given them. You still see some Jews today with tassels coming outside of their clothes. As soon as she got close enough and touched the tassel, her bleeding stopped. She was healed. It was dramatic. We don't know if it was obvious to the people around her what had happened. I suspect that it probably wasn't. I don't think everybody knew what was going on. I've tried to understand her emotions through this event, but I can't really imagine myself in that situation. And I don't think I'd have enough faith like she did to think I could just touch the fringe of his garment and I'd be healed. Then when it did happen, how do you respond? How did she respond? Quietly. She didn't let everybody know what was going on until pressed about it. I can't really comprehend what it was like for her. I think if I was sick, bleeding for 12 years, and was miraculously healed, I'd be making a big noise about it. But she was quiet. Jesus said, "Who was it that touched me?" When all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowd surround you and are pressing you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me." I love this exchange. It's so typical of Peter. He's my hero, by the way. Jesus, the creator, the sustainer of the universe, felt power flow from him to heal her. I want to make sure we understand what Jesus said here. Jesus perceived power exit from him. I don't think that indicates that he wasn't active in her healing. I don't think for a moment that he wasn't aware of everything that happened. He asked the question to start the interaction with her. Not because he didn't know. He knew exactly what was going on. As the creator, sustainer of the universe, Jesus is always active in everything that's going on. Look at what Paul would write to the Colossians. "For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible," that's the spiritual world and the physical world, "whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all were created through him and for him." Now look at the next verse. "And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together." The Apostle Paul, writing to the church in Colossae, reminds us that Jesus is the agent of creation. He's the one that spoke the words, "Let there be light," and so forth. But he's not just the agent of creation. He's the agent that sustains it all. All things are held together, is present active. They're constantly, presently being held together by his power. If Jesus stopped executing his power, it would all go away, including history. It would all cease to exist. It is only maintained by his active involvement. So Jesus, following Jairus, I would guess probably having a conversation, but being pressed on by the crowd. As Jairus would go ahead, the crowds would close in behind him. Jesus had to walk a little bit behind him and would get pressed by the crowds. As he was walking along, he knew the woman was coming up behind him and touched his garment. He knew, and he permitted the energy, the force, whatever you want to call it, his healing power, to go from him to her and to heal her. He was active in that. He can't not be active in it. If for one plank of time, say plank with an N in the middle, if Jesus lost plank time, the universe would cease to exist. Now, just in case you need to know this scientific term, Planck time is the smallest unit of time. Planck time is approximately 5.39 times 10 to the negative 44th power seconds.
Do we have stopwatches for that?
No. Nothing mechanical can work that fast. We're talking less than a microsecond. We're talking less than a nanosecond. Less than
100 meter.
Oh, yeah. It's something that's theoretical only, can't be measured by anything we can do. 5.39 times 10 to the negative 44th seconds. That's an incredibly short period of time. If Jesus lost focus for just that long, it would all be gone. Now, I want you to think about the ramifications of what that means. Jesus is always active, involved in what's going on in the universe. He can never not be. I've used this illustration before. As he's on the cross, or on the ground being nailed to the cross, he is holding together the material of the nails, of the wood, of the hammer. As they're being driven through his bones in the increasingly difficult pain, he's holding them together. And I don't think this is an unconscious thing. I think this is conscious. He always has to be involved. So Jesus knew who touched his tassels. He then knowingly healed her body. But Jesus said, "Who touched me?" Don't assume that doesn't mean, or that means that he doesn't know. He did know. But when he asked who touched me, he opened up the interaction with the woman, so people could know what was going on. Remember, who touched me? Nobody would confess, because everybody was touching him because they were all swarming him. And then Jesus said, "I perceive that power has gone out from me." He didn't indicate that he didn't know what had happened. He said, "I'm telling you, power has left me. Who touched me? I want to have a conversation with you." He was initiating a conversation between the woman and himself. There's also another side to this. He was delaying his response to the home of Jairus. We would see him do this again 2 or 3 years later, when his buddy Lazarus, "Hey, Lazarus is sick. We got to get to Bethany." "Yeah, we'll get there." 4 days later, after he's dead, buried, stinks, there's Lazarus in the tomb. "Hey, Lazarus, come on out." Why? So he can show who he is. He can demonstrate his power. Now go back to verse 45. And Jesus said, "Who was it that touched me?" When all denied it, Peter, in his typical Peter self, said, "Master, everybody's touching you." Jesus asked who touched me, and Peter's response was, "Hey, boss, You're in the middle of a crowd. Everyone is touching everyone. This is like, it's New Year's Eve in New York City. We're going to watch the ball drop, but we're not going to be able to turn around. We're going to be in these cattle cars. That's what it was like. What do you mean, who touched me? Peter was asking. Can't you just hear Peter rebuking Jesus? What, are you crazy? How do we know who touched you? Everybody touched you. He had no clue of what had happened yet. No one was answering Jesus' question, and Peter couldn't solve the issue. Verse 47, and when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. Jesus initiated the interaction between the now healed woman and himself. Peter and the boys and everyone else could see now and hear what was going on. There was a lesson to learn from all of this. When no one else came forward, the woman finally did. She fell down to a position of subservience before Jesus. She then admitted to all present that she had touched Jesus. That's a big admission. Remember, she was ceremonially clean for 12 years. It was against the law for her to touch Jesus because she was unclean. Today we have laws against infecting a sexual partner with HIV knowingly. Well, take that whole situation and change. If you're unclean, you were prohibited from making contact with others. It was the law in Israel. But she admitted to doing it. She was admitting to a crime. She was unclean for 12 years. She was prohibited from societal contact because she was unclean. And she admitted to touching the fringe of Jesus' garment. But more important than her confession of a crime was her statement that came next. She was healed when she touched Jesus' fringe. That's a big deal. It's a big miracle. For Jesus to stand in front of someone and touch them and heal them, okay, I get that. But this was not that. She touched Jesus from behind, surreptitiously. And he still healed, without the confrontation, without people seeing it. In the minds of the people, that made it an even bigger miracle. This confrontation, Jesus to be mad that someone dared take his power. Someone wants this episode to reflect on Jesus being, hey, who touched me? But that's not Jesus. That's not what he was doing. He wanted to have the interaction so she could confess and people would see. They probably knew her. Capernaum wasn't that big. Everybody knew everybody. They probably knew who she was. That she was ceremonial unclean, couldn't go to the synagogue, couldn't go to the temple. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. I love Jesus' heart. Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. This is the only place that Jesus uses the word daughter for an individual. It's the only place. What's he saying to her when he says, daughter, your faith has made you well? Jesus was speaking tenderly to her. He was placing himself in a position of love and support to heal this woman. There's also a sense that Jesus responded to the woman as her Lord and her Savior. He was saying, daughter, your faith in me has served you well. Even if it's just physically. We don't know about her salvific experience. We don't know if she trusted him for her life or just for her healing. We shouldn't automatically assume that she became a repentant follower of Jesus. We're not told that she did. We're not told that she didn't, so we don't know. But Jesus told her to go in peace. So I kind of suspect that she probably was, but we don't know. This passage is not yet complete, though. Remember, Jesus was going to the house of Jairus, the ruler of the local synagogue, because of his ailing daughter. So while they were speaking, while he was still speaking, someone from the ruler's house came and said, "Your daughter is dead. Don't trouble the teacher anymore." The pain that Jairus had to go through now. I suspect that Jairus was anxious to get to his house and see what was going on with his daughter, but Jesus stopped to heal with a woman who was hopeless. Don't you see the frustration in Jairus? She's hopeless! My daughter's dying! They're not mutually exclusive, by the way. Now someone comes along and says that she's already dead. See, you waited so long, now she's dead. I can't imagine what it was like. Maybe if Jesus had not stopped for the unclean woman, he could have healed her rather than let her die. Frustrating, angry, confused, all three? Yeah, I think so. Jairus was now in a position, he had humbled himself in front of a guy who was claiming to be the Messiah, and his daughter was still dead. Because he stopped for an unclean woman. It doesn't get any worse than that. But there's more in this verse. Don't trouble the rabbi. She's dead. It appears that the belief was such that once dead, it was over. There's nothing that could be done. But we know that's not correct, right? But Jesus, on hearing this answered him, say, "Do not fear, only believe, she will be well." Jesus said to Jairus that he needed to have faith, that she would be well. Jesus was still in complete control of the universe, including life and death. And when he came to the house, he allowed no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the father and the mother of the child. When they get to the house, Jesus says, "Hey, Peter, James, and John, you come with me." Those are the inner circle, right? Those are his closest apostles. It's clear that all the apostles were close to Jesus, closer than the disciples, but these are the closest three. Peter, James, and John go in with him, and Mom and Dad go in. We've seen several times that Peter, James, and John were privileged to view events that the others weren't. I don't know why. I don't know why Jesus selected them, but he did. And they become part of the foundation, like the other apostles, of the church. And they go inside with Mom and Dad. And all were weeping and mourning for her, but he said, "Do not weep, for she's not dead, but sleeping." The verse has caused a lot of consternation for preachers. Jesus knew she was dead. He wasn't mistaken. Her life is in his hands. It's always been in his hands. Some have suggested that the servants didn't get it right, but that the girl was still alive. But I'm not going to accept that. In our world, we're removed from death. Unless you work in public safety or in a hospital, you're pretty much removed from death. A lot of adults go through life without ever watching someone die. Without being exposed for more than what's it take? 4 seconds, 5 seconds to walk across the casket? Most people are not exposed to death. Most people never see anybody die. But in the time of Jesus, there was no fire department. There's no EMS. There weren't even really emergency rooms and doctors to care for people. Who took care of Mom when she dies? Family does, right. They knew what death was. Way more than we do today. You dealt with the death of a family member personally and in the home. Everyone in the family got to see it up close and personal. They could tell when death came. They could also tell when it had not yet come. Way more than we've experienced today. So, what does Jesus mean that she was sleeping? This has caused a lot of problems for preachers. A temporary state, okay. Just like you were sleeping at night, okay. Jesus wasn't mistaken. Sleeping is often used as a euphemism for dead, but I don't think that's what he meant here. I think Jesus was making a statement that mom and dad shouldn't cry as if she was sleeping. To you, it seems like she should just be sleeping because, as Linda said, it's temporary. She'll be awake soon. Jesus knew what he was going to do. He was going to restore life to her body. Look at the next verse. And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. They knew she was dead. And Jesus said, it's just temporary. You're going to rejoice here shortly. She's going to be alive. The servants knew that she was dead, so they laughed at Jesus. They just didn't know what was coming. But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, "Child, arise." And her spirit returned. She was dead. Her spirit returned, and she got up at once, and he directed that something should be given to her to eat. I'm fascinated by her spirit returned. I don't know where it was. But if you need some kind of biblical support for being close to seeing the pearly gate, seeing the white light, or whatever, this might be it. Her spirit and her body were separated. She was dead. No brain waves, no heart, no nothing. She was dead. Her spirit returned. And she got up at once, and Jesus directed that something should be given to her. Jesus took the dead girl by the hand and said, "Child, arise." In that instant, life returned to her body. Luke describes it as her spirit returned. The servants had to be thinking, as they saw life return to a lifeless body, that something incredible was happening. They affirmed she was dead, and she was dead. And now she's not. I've kind of seen that. Not for any long term, but I've seen people declared dead that weren't. That's kind of goofy, kind of spooky. Had a dead guy grab me once. That's a different story. Once life returned, she got up. And then Jesus directed that she be given some food to eat. I've often wondered why Jesus would do that first. She was dead, now she's not, give her something to eat. I don't know if it was a hot dog or what.
Probably a falafel.
They're awful. It wasn't a pork hot dog for sure. But, you know, there were all those pigs that just died, so maybe it was cheap. I don't know. I wonder if Jesus did that so everyone would know that she's alive and well. Hey, give her something to eat. Watch her chow down. She's alive. This is not Weekend at Bernie's or the White House. She was ready to eat. She was alive. But then things get more complex. And her parents were amazed, but he charged them to tell no one what had happened. Oh, here we go again. Why is he doing this? Mom and Dad were amazed. I think I want to go on the news. You know, CNN, Fox News, everywhere. I want to say, hey, she was dead. I saw her dead. She was dead. Then Jesus made her alive. Mom and Dad want to say that to everybody, right? Nope, don't tell anybody. Tell no one what happened. I suspect that this was a problem for the mom and dad. I suspect that they couldn't. What do you do when Jesus says, don't tell everybody what had just happened? Why would Jesus tell them not to tell anyone? I think Jesus knew people would see the miracles, but not the one who performed the miracle. They would be infatuated with the miracle and forget the miracle worker. Israel had a propensity for that. Forget the lawgiver, let's just be infatuated and in love with the law. So Jesus knew it wasn't yet time for him to be such on a pinnacle that the Pharisees would want to execute him. The people weren't ready to believe that it was God in their midst. And miracles were a central part of his ministry to authenticate who he was. But he wasn't yet ready for the cross. There were lots of other things that he had to do first. The people would need to get to the end of Jesus' ministry to properly recognize what the Messiah was actually doing for them. We have two events in our text this morning. One where a woman who was sick for 12 years is healed, and another where a 12-year-old girl is raised from the dead. The woman is healed without overt action from Jesus. And while Jesus was dealing with that event, the girl dies. Jesus then takes his inner circle to see her get raised back to life. We saw that Jesus is the creator, sustainer of the universe, with the power of life and death, with the power to heal and the power to raise the dead. Each of these events illustrates the reality that Jesus is the Messiah. That's what his earthly ministry was all about. Establishing that he was or is the Messiah. But as verse 56 indicates, the people weren't yet ready to accept all that being the Messiah meant. They didn't understand what the Old Testament had given, that there would be two advents of the Messiah. One as a suffering servant, and the other as a conquering king. They just forgot the suffering servant part and just focused on the conquering king. And so Jesus had to establish over 3.5 years that he's the suffering servant first. Because without the cross, none of us would be saved. In fact, no one in history would ever be saved without the cross. So he had to get through his life to the point of the cross. Otherwise, nothing else would matter. Father, thank you that Jesus willingly went to the cross. That he was on the cross to pay our penalty. But in the meantime, he was caring for the needs of the sick. He was caring for the needs of the dead. What a story. What an emotional roller coaster of a day for Jairus. What a pleasure for the woman healed. All of it to point to you. Thank you. Thank you, Father, for loving us. We love you. In Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for watching or listening to this teaching on demand from Friendship Grace Brethren Church. Please consider sending us an email at info@friendshipgracebrethren.com to let us know how this teaching may have helped you. Please also consider joining us in person at Friendship Grace Brethren Church, located at 10251 Metro Parkway, Suite 116, Fort Myers, Florida, just south of the intersection of Metro and Colonial Boulevard. Sunday school begins at 9 and worship service at 10 a.m. We look forward to seeing you in person at Friendship Grace Brethren Church.